History loves a hero. It loves the myth of the 300, the idea that a warrior born of divine blood is the apex predator of the ancient world. But biology doesn't care about your myths. Biology cares about efficiency. On one side, we have the Spartan Hoplite, a warrior bred like a prize-fighting dog, a cult of honor. On the other, the Roman Legionnaire, a professional soldier, a construction worker who specializes in homicide, a machine of iron. When the perfect human meets the perfect system, who ends up in the mass grave? Welcome to the Shield Wall. Let's strip away the Hollywood glamour. Sparta was an experiment in eugenics. This wasn't training, this was a culling. If a Spartan infant showed a single defect, discarded into a chasm. Those who survived entered the Agoge. They were starved to induce a predatory instinct. They were beaten to dull their nociceptors, the sensory neurons that signal pain. By age 20, a Spartan wasn't just a soldier, he was a sociopath with high bone density, conditioned to view death as a promotion. Rome was different. Rome didn't want heroes, Rome wanted standardization. The Legionnaire was the world's first industrial soldier. He wasn't born, he was made. His training wasn't just combat, it was endurance, marching 20 miles in 5 hours with 60 pounds of gear. Sparta created the ultimate individual within a rigid line. Rome created a replaceable part in a flexible machine. The Spartan fights for personal glory and the fear of shame. The Roman fights because it is Tuesday and he wants his pension. Let's look at the biomechanics of their survival. Subject A, the Spartan, optimized for explosive power. Decades of wrestling and holding a heavy shield created immense hypertrophy in the deltoids and trapezoids. Their philosophy is one strike. The kinetic chain starts at the heel, travels through the hip, and terminates at the spear tip. If it connects, it pierces armor, skin, and organ tissue. Weakness, rigidity. Their skeleton is hardened, but their doctrine is brittle. Break the formation and the organism panics. Subject B, the Roman, optimized for stamina and trauma. The Legionnaire isn't trying to knock you out, he is trying to bleed you out. He fights from a crouch behind the massive Scutum shield, low center of gravity. His weapon, the gladius, is terrifyingly short. Why? Because biomechanically, a short lever arm allows for rapid retraction and re-entry. Stab, twist, retract, stab. While the Spartan winds up for a haymaker, the Roman has already severed your femoral artery and perforated your small intestine twice. The collision. The Spartan Phalanx relies on othismos, the shove. 8 ranks of men pushing into the backs of the front line. Imagine the physics here. Thousands of newtons of pressure compressing the chest cavity. This is compressive asphyxia. In the center of a Spartan formation, you can't breathe. You are a brick in a wall of flesh. But Rome doesn't shove. Rome absorbs. The Roman system acts like a shock absorber. When a legionnaire gets tired, a whistle blows. He steps back through the gaps. A fresh, well-rested killer steps forward. The Spartan is fighting a hydra. Every time he kills one Roman, a fresh one appears, full of energy, ready to exploit the Spartan's fatigue. Lactic acid builds up in the Spartan's muscles. His spear gets heavy. His reaction time slows by milliseconds, and that is all the Roman needs. Sparta relies on perfection. Rome relies on attrition. In a long war, the machine always beats the wolf. But we aren't talking about a war. We are talking about the killing blow. The Spartan carries a weapon that changed the laws of physics on the battlefield, a spear that strikes with the force of a car crash. The Roman carries a shield made of plywood and leather. What happens when 2.5 meters of ash wood and iron tip collides with a Roman shield at full velocity? Does the shield shatter, or does the Spartan's wrist snap from the recoil? Next time, we calculate the joules, we look at the shatter points, we enter the geometry of slaughter. The answer to our previous question, neither shatters. The Roman Scutum wasn't just a plank of wood, it was history's first plywood, layers of oak glued with grain running perpendicular. It was designed not to block force, but to absorb it. When the Spartan spear hits with 1,500 joules of kinetic energy, the shield acts like a catcher's mitt. It catches the spear tip, and that is where the physics turns against the Spartan. The 8-foot spear is now a lever, but not for the wielder. With the tip trapped in the shield, the Roman applies a small amount of torque at the fulcrum. At the other end of the lever, the Spartan's wrist, the force is multiplied catastrophically. The Spartan has lost his primary weapon. He reaches for his short sword, the xyphos, but he has already made a fatal error. He allowed the Roman to step inside the kill zone. In close-quarter battle, there are two schools of thought: reach and frequency. Sparta is the master of reach. The phalanx is a giant porcupine. It relies on area denial, stay away or die. But this geometry has a fatal blind spot: minimum engagement distance. Once an enemy gets past the spear tip, that long pole becomes a liability. It's clumsy, it catches on friendly troops. Rome understands this. Their weapon, the gladius, is barely 60 centimeters long. Why? Because in the crush of battle, where chests are pressed against backs, you don't have room to slash, you can only thrust. The gladius works like an engine piston: retract, stab, retract, stab. The average frequency, 2 lethal strikes every second. Let's talk about soft tissue damage. Hollywood loves decapitations, but cutting off a head is hard work. The Romans were the world's most brutal field surgeons. They didn't aim for the head, they aimed for the gut and the groin. A 2-inch stab wound to the abdomen was a death sentence in the ancient world. First, hypovolemic shock. If the abdominal aorta is nicked, blood pressure drops to 0 in seconds. Second, sepsis. If you don't die immediately, the blade perforates the bowel. Bacteria floods the sterile abdominal cavity. It is a slow, feverish, agonizing death that takes 3 days. The Roman doesn't need to kill you instantly. He just needs you to fall down so he can step over you. They turned the battlefield into a slaughterhouse assembly line. But Rome's deadliest weapon wasn't the sword, it was the gap. The Spartan phalanx is a solid block of concrete, powerful when pushing forward, but concrete doesn't bend, it cracks. The Roman maniple formation had deliberate gaps between units. When the phalanx charges, the Romans fall back, sucking the Spartans into these kill pockets. Suddenly, the Spartans' shield wall advantage is gone. They are being flanked. At 0 range, the massive round auspice shield is a burden. It's too wide to rotate. The Roman hooks his curved scutum inside the Spartan's shield, prying it open like a can opener. The Spartan's torso is exposed, and thwack, the gladius does its work. The collapse of the phalanx wasn't a failure of courage, it was a failure of geometry. In a theoretical vacuum, on a flat gym floor, Sparta might win through sheer power, but history doesn't happen in a gym. History happens on hills, in swamps, and over broken rocks. In the next episode, we leave the physics lab and enter the muddy reality. What happens when the Spartan tank is forced to fight on uneven ground? When the floor beneath them isn't flat, the cohesion of the shield wall suffers microfractures, and the Romans, like hyenas, are waiting for just one slip. Welcome to the day gods broke. There's a myth that the phalanx was invincible from the front, and for centuries that was true. If you stood on flat ground and tried to fight a Spartan-style phalanx head-on, you were feeding yourself into a wood chipper. It was a wall of godlike geometry, perfect alignment. But nature hates perfection. Nature loves chaos. The Romans knew they couldn't break the wall with force, so they didn't. They let the ground do it for them. This is the story of how a few rocks and a patch of uneven grass destroyed a 500-year legacy of warfare. This is the moment the gods broke. The battlefield isn't a chessboard, it's a living, breathing hazard.
The phalanx requires absolute cohesion. Every man must be shoulder to shoulder. If one man trips, a gap opens. If a gap opens, the phalanx fails. At the Battle of Pydna, the phalanx pushed the Romans back. Initially, it was a slaughter. The Romans couldn't get close. Their swords were useless against the forest of spears. But as they pushed forward, they advanced into rough ground, slope, rocks, gullies. The phalanx began to lose its shape. It didn't break, it fractured. Micro-gaps appeared, a space of 2 feet here, 3 feet there. To a Spartan, this was an inconvenience. To a Roman centurion, this was an invitation.
The Roman command was decentralized. While the phalanx waited for a single order from the king to stop return, every single Roman centurion had the autonomy to make decisions. They saw the cracks in the wall. The order went out, infiltrate. This is where the system destroys the hero. The Romans stopped fighting the formation. They started fighting the individuals. They surged into the gaps. Suddenly, the fight wasn't army versus army. It was one Roman versus one hoplite inside a telephone booth. In close quarters, the 20-foot sarissa/spear is useless. You can't swing it. You can't drop it fast enough. The hoplite is trapped by his own equipment. He is encased in bronze, blind to his sides, holding a stick that is too long. The Roman is free. He is slicing hamstrings. He is stabbing groins. He is tearing the phalanx apart from the inside out. It wasn't a battle anymore. It was an execution. History tells us that in less than 1 hour, 20,000 men of the phalanx were cut down. The Roman losses? Less than 1,000. Think about that ratio, 20 to 1. This wasn't just a defeat, it was an obsolescence event. The rigid, honorable, face-to-face style of Spartan warfare didn't just lose, it became extinct. Rome proved that flexibility survives, rigidity dies. The Roman Legionnaire stood over the corpse of the hoplite, wiped the blood from his gladius, and marched on to conquer the known world. The era of the warrior was over. The era of the soldier had begun. History has given its verdict. Rome won the war. The legion is superior to the phalanx in a mass battle, but that is war. What about combat? What if we strip away the armies, strip away the terrain, strip away the generals? What if we take one Spartan hoplite and one Roman legionnaire? We lock them in a cage, no escape, no backup, no terrain advantages, just 2 men, their weapons, and their intent to kill. Does the Spartans' individual ferocity beat the Romans' programmed discipline? In the final episode, we run the simulation. We are going to find out who walks out and who gets carried out in a bag. The ultimate verdict: no rules. In episode 3, we proved that Rome wins the war. The system beats the hero. But war is a game of averages. Combat is a game of absolutes. Remove the legion, remove the phalanx, take the Roman out of his machine, take the Spartan out of his line. What do you have left? On the left, a man who is trained since age 7 to be a singular killing instrument. On the right, a man trained to trust the soldier next to him, but today there is no one next to him. Today, biology overrides logistics. The bell rings. Immediately, the Roman is in trouble. The Scutum shield, Rome's greatest asset in a war, is a liability in a duel. It weighs 10 kilograms. It is designed to link with other shields. Alone, it is a heavy door that blocks the Roman's own peripheral vision. Subject A, Spartan, he is lighter. His aspis shield is strapped to his forearm, not held by a handle. This frees up his hand mechanics. He has the reach advantage. He controls the red zone. The Roman is suffering from cognitive overload. In a legion, he only has to worry about his front. Here, the Spartan can move laterally. The Spartan is the predator. The Roman is the prey. The Roman makes his move, the rush. He needs to get inside the guard. But the Spartan has trained for this since he could walk. The aspis bash.
This isn't just a push, it's blunt force trauma. The Roman's head snaps back, the cervical spine compresses, equilibrium is lost. And here is the difference between a soldier and a warrior. The soldier looks for orders, the warrior looks for arteries. The Spartan discards the long spear. He draws the exifos in a reverse grip. He steps into the falling Roman. The Roman is disoriented. He is alone. His programming has no solution for this chaos. The Spartan drives the exifos downward into the gap between the neck and the collarbone. The lights go out. Winner, the Spartan. In a 1v1 duel, the specialist beats the generalist. But history is not written by duelists, it is written by armies. Rome died, but its soul survived. Rome gave us the regular army, the infantry, the discipline, the logistics, the idea that quantity has a quality of its own. Sparta gave us the special forces, the Tier 1 operator, the idea that a small group of elite, hyper-lethal individuals can change the course of history. We need both. We need the wall, and we need the wolf. That is my verdict. In a war, I bet on Rome. In a cage, I bet on Sparta. But I'm just the analyst. You are the jury. Go down to the comments right now. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me the Legionnaire would crush the Spartan. Tell me about the endurance factor. Start the war in the comments section below. I read everything. If you survived this series, if you learned something about the dark science of combat, destroy that subscribe button. Join the arsenal. We are building an army of our own here. To the thousands of you watching, thank you for your time and your attention. I am Julian. This is the Arsenal. Keep your shield up.